Welcome back to Mom in Mind. I'm your host, Dr. Kat. On our episode today, we are joined by Liz and Natalie of the Golden Hour Birth podcast. And they describe themselves as two average Midwest moms having authentic conversations around birth stories on their podcast. And they're here to laugh with you and cry with you, hold space while really trying to normalize all the unknowns that have caused you to pivot through the empowering journey of parenthood. And in their podcast, they're really trying to emphasize the importance of sharing birth stories, hearing birth stories, and also finding ways to heal. So let's hear from Liz and Natalie. Welcome, Liz and Natalie. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for
Thank you
having us.
so much for having us.
Yeah, I'm really excited to hear about the work that you're doing and the podcast that you have, especially because, me in the mental health world, I definitely know the power of storytelling and hearing other people's experience. Yeah, I'm interested to know how it's going for you and what kinds of things people are sharing. But first, Liz, if you can start, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Sure. So I'm a mom of two little ones, very little, 2 and 4. So I'm still in the thick of the toddlerhood part. And Natalie and I are sister-in-laws, and we started our podcast. What is it now? Almost a year and a half ago.
Yeah.
And that definitely inspired me to start doula training, which I finished a couple of months ago, doing like the certification and things like that now. And then we just started our course, which is how to process your birth story. Nice. So we're working hard on that and just really enjoying meeting amazing people and hearing so many just amazing stories.
Right. That's awesome. Thanks. And Natalie, how about you?
Yeah, I'm Natalie. I'm born and raised in St. Louis. So my husband and I, my husband and I, my husband Sam and I met back in 2010 and then started dating in 2016. And Liz and I met, and right after Sam and I started dating, that I was going to go to Australia. So me and Liz bonded over our love for travel, and then sure enough, she got pregnant in 2018 first, and we started bonding over our love for birth and pregnancy and all those things. So I feel like I've kind of just been like following in her footsteps between starting the podcast together. I have two little ones too. I have a 2-year-old and a 9-month-old. So everything is just right behind her. And we started the podcast together. It was definitely a conversation in 2020, but then we both got pregnant and we were like, we got a lot on our hands right now. We'll put that on a pause. And just kept feeling these creative juices flowing once our kids were a little older, and had a conversation and put it together like the next day. So it's been just an amazing experience. Yeah. And then I started doula training last month. So I'll be done here at the end of the year.
Wow, cool. So you guys are in it. You're swimming around in births all the time. Stories and experiences and learning and all of that. Yes. Yeah, it's quite a world, for sure. That's great. So, what have you guys found about birth stories that kind of keeps you going?
Yeah.
I think birth stories are just also different. And what really got us into birth stories, I feel like, was when I started opening up about my postpartum experience and having postpartum anxiety. And I started being more open about it and putting it on Instagram. And it just so happened that Natalie was like going through the exact same experience that I had previously, that I was now open to posting about. So I still have the text saved when you were like, I just saw your Instagram and I am feeling that, and just thank you so much for, opening up and like
Super cool.
just, being vulnerable about that. And so that's kind of, that's kind of like the backbone of our podcast, is just helping other people not feel alone.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And people, everyone that's come on has said that they feel, I don't know, more, I don't know, free or open after telling their experience, and that they hope that their experience can help someone else.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Mm-hmm.
I think my driving force and like what feels so good is like when my friends or um, women that we've had on sharing their story, and like the next day they'll text me or email me and just be like, oh my gosh, like I woke up and I feel lighter.
Mm.
I feel like I've been holding on to a part of this that like I haven't really been able to come to terms with. But just saying it out loud and telling you guys has actually just helped me like kind of like let the little stuff go. And we had my partner on, Sam, on in April, which was our first dad. And he even said the next day, he's like, that actually feels like so good. I actually feel like I've let all the negative stuff go.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the reason I keep doing this and why like we keep going.
Yeah, for sure. It is really powerful. I mean, kind of like equal opposite how powerful shame can be silencing. Like hearing somebody else's experience and being reflected in that can be so opening and freeing.
Mhm.
But I assume you hear this a lot, that people just kind of suck it up, or don't feel like they can or should share certain parts of their experience, and that's throughout life. But birth,
Mhm.
it's real, like people assume that it's going to be great. I don't know why
Yeah.
they still do, and sometimes it is, but there's a lot of assumptions. Are you hearing that in the birth stories that you guys hear? People feeling they need to keep things quiet on behalf of this kind of like myth of what birth should be.
Yeah.
Yes and no. Um, I feel like no, because like I think we're at finally a time in society, and like we're not going to silence ourselves. We're not going to um like let society and the norms get the best of us and things
Mm-hmm.
like that. And so um there I know that there's like a ton of people out there, like friends of mine and things like that, that like don't feel comfortable sharing, and that's okay. That everyone has their prerogative. But with like the people who want to share and want to like open up that part of their lives, it's like I feel like it's so freeing, and
Mm-hmm.
it's just like a way to connect and community, which has really been like the backbone for us. And um, me and Liz have been open about like us starting medication because that's what we've needed in the time. And like I'm just so tired of like this whole stigma around like you have to be quiet about your trauma, be quiet about this, be
Right.
quiet about that. It's like, no, we're in 2023. I'm not going to be quiet anymore.
Nice. Good. Good. And it's giving other people permission as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, Liz, you were going to add to that?
Um, I don't remember now. Sorry.
That's okay. No problem
Sorry.
at all. No problem at all. Yeah, it's well, what kind of things are you hearing? What are some themes that come up in birth stories? Yeah, things that you're happy that people are sharing in their story.
Yeah. I think a big theme is that you prepare for one thing and then something completely different happens.
Hmm.
So we're
Hmm.
always talking about pivoting in whatever, in birth and postpartum, pregnancy, you know, there's just no like one way that things happen.
Right.
But in your birth classes, that's that's what we're learning, is that you do this a certain way and then the outcome is this, and then you go on and you breastfeed, and then you um, bond with your baby, and it's just great. And even with my first, I prepared so much for my birth that I didn't prepare for postpartum at all. Like, because I just thought it would just be normal and great. And so that's definitely a big theme in the birth stories that we've heard. And then another one, big one, is that a lot of people either didn't realize that they had experienced birth trauma until later. And then, that comes up so much in mental health and bonding and just everything. And so a lot of people after the fact are like, wow, I did have something traumatic happen, or I had postpartum anxiety or depression, and we just don't know. And there's just a lot of non-education.
And yeah, all good. There's like people aren't informed enough.
Yes.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, I think that that's true also. Sometimes it's like assuming that the person who needs the information is going to know what to ask or where to look. You don't know what you don't know, so it would be nice if somebody else was like, "Hey, be cool for you guys to know about this." But we find out the hard way sometimes.
Yeah. I think an important thing for me has been a mother's intuition. I feel like I've really learned about my intuition and listening to my gut in this past year with the birth of my second child. And I'm realizing like how many of the women that we've had on have like had this intuition about either they're like gonna have that birth trauma or just something. There's like just something that they just pinpoint and like can feel down in their bones um that they just like already knew. And so I think just listening to that and really harboring and feeling that has just kind of given me a sense of like, I'm never going to let this go
That like
because
sense of
I know
your
my
own
children.
intuition. Oh, okay.
Yeah. And like
Knowing your
knowing my
babies.
children, like I know my children better than anyone else. And I know what's best for them. And I think with my first child, I like really focused on like all these rules of like from what I saw on social media. And in this second time around and like months down the line now, I just finally feel more secure in who I am and who I am as a mother. Um, and I think it was that I was told that like I know my child and um, I have like my mother's gut. Like I have, I have my gut instinct and like I just need to follow it.
That is important. And to your point, it can take some time to develop that.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't always like lock in right away. For a lot of people,
Yeah.
it doesn't. Like you gotta first deal with what you just went through, and then figure out what's what.
Yeah.
But not that you don't have intuition, but it's really hard to know what is what. You
Yes.
know, right during and after birth for sure.
Mhm.
It sounds like you both had your own kind of birth experiences. So yeah, it sounds like you both obviously had your own experiences that have led to many things, but being really passionate about birth stories. Would you care to share parts of your birth story, starting with Natalie?
Yeah. So I've had two really amazing, positive, empowering births. And I think my really focus has been on like my postpartum experiences. Although like while in the moment I didn't think that they were bad, but actually like being able to be outside of them now, I'm like, oh wow, that was hard. Um, but I planned a birth center birth with my son in 2021, and everything went according to plan, but I did have intense back labor because of his positioning and being sunny side up.
Yep.
I was also like on the verge of preeclampsia, so I was like kind of teetering on this wall of like being induced or letting it go. But I did progress and was able to go into labor naturally, and went to the birth center, and yeah, he was just like in not good positioning, and so my back labor was like killing me, and I was not having any fun, and so I went upstairs and got the epidural and had a great time then. Um, and then just postpartum, kind of going back to like what Liz put out on Mother's Day of 2021, that she was experiencing some postpartum anxiety after her first, and I knew that she was having a hard time, but I never really knew the depth of it.
Mhm.
And so her seeing her post, I texted her like, your Instagram is exactly how I'm feeling. And I was able to kind of get out of like the fog because my husband and Liz were like so supportive.
Nice.
Yeah, I had a really good support team. And then um, my I had a lot of anxiety and depression when I was pregnant with my daughter back in 2022. That was a really hard, dark time for me. A lot of just factors, external factors that were out of my control.
Mhm.
And then my labor and birth were absolutely amazing. And then she was born in January of this year, and I thought things were going really well, and then it just slowly just got worse and worse. She wasn't taking a bottle. We were experiencing like a lip tie and tongue tie, and I was taking her to multiple doctor's appointments, just trying to figure out what was going on, chiropractor appointments, and um, she was just kind of like a really fussy baby. And so now I'm 9 months down the line. I've stopped breastfeeding. She is absolutely thriving. And now I'm able to see how dark that postpartum time was, and
Mhm.
um, I've now been on medication, and life is just so much better, and
Nice.
I
Good.
finally feel like I'm bonding with her, and I'm excited to see where it goes from here. I just love her more than anything.
That's awesome. Yeah, thanks for sharing that.
Yeah.
It's quite a process. And I appreciate also that you're open to sharing about medication because, as you've probably heard, there's a lot of stigma around it. And on the other side of that stigma, there can be just like incredible relief.
Hmm.
It's like, you know, it's medicine. That's what it's supposed to do, ideally.
Yeah.
You
And I've
feel
been seeing a therapist, so like
nice.
it's a double.
That's the best. Yeah, the two
Yeah.
in combo is that the best.
Yes.
It is really hard to see what's going on when you're in it and just how bad it can be or how bad it's really going, which is tricky.
Yeah.
Like you think I'm just going to put one foot in front of the other and you
Hmm.
do. But man, it takes a toll. Just like the
Yeah.
time, the amount of time that you do that also takes its own toll. Just
Hmm.
could go on for a long time. I'm glad it didn't last too long.
Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
How
you're
about you,
really
Liz?
thinking about that next feed or that next night,
Mm-hmm.
you know, am I going to get sleep tonight? Or, yeah.
The
Right.
nights, oh my gosh.
Yeah, the nights can be rough for sure. Yeah, for you, Liz, what was your experiences like?
Yeah. So my first, let's see. So I got pregnant in 2018. And then I decided I wanted to do a birth center birth. Um, I just don't like needles. So I was like a little afraid of the epidural.
Mm-hmm.
So I really, really researched about the birth center, and I loved the midwives that were there. So I felt really prepared for my birth. I went in, went into labor spontaneously. I had some high blood pressure issues, but nothing of concern that I needed to be induced or anything. So I went into labor and then had labored really well. I was in the tub and on the toilet and all the fun places, and ended up, my blood pressure was rising during my birth. So the midwives kind of, you know, I don't want to say rushed me, but they were basically saying, if baby's not out in the next, 15 minutes, we're going to transfer you upstairs. And at that time, I hadn't um, toured the hospital because they're attached, but not in the same, floor. And to me, like, going upstairs was like something horrible is going to happen, which now I'm like, oh, they were just going to monitor extra, but at the time it was like, okay, well, I'm going to push this baby out right now. So
right.
I did. And then I started to hemorrhage, and my placenta wasn't coming out like it should. And it was like, I guess 30 minutes of like heavy clots, coming out. And I didn't know what was going on. I was just, having Arthur on my chest and kind of in that bliss. But then they were like, oh, like, we need to transfer you upstairs. So they have an elevator that like drops down, and, they had me get on the stretcher, I guess. And then I just remember the elevator ride being very, I felt very out of control and frightened because I just didn't know what was going on.
Yeah. I don't know if this is true for you, but sometimes people aren't being told what's going on, and that adds to it. They're doing what they need to do, but which is great and fine, wonderful, do what you need to do. But when you don't have someone translating it for you, it feels like really like you're alone in it, and not having information can be disempowering.
Yeah, and was it was very quick, So my birth was very slow and dark, and I had music, and like it was it was just me and Arthur, or not me and Arthur, me and Jason for a lot of it. And then all of a sudden, I'm surrounded by a lot of people. It's bright, and I'm just like, what is going on? So they had to have the doctor on call come and hand deliver my placenta, which was like more painful than the birth.
Yeah.
And they gave me morphine for it, which made me feel way out of control, like so loopy.
Yep.
I couldn't even hold my baby. It was just like, yeah. At the time, I'm just kind of unaware of what was going on, but like looking back, I'm like, oh my, that was scary. Like I was scared.
Yeah, for sure.
So recovery was tough because I had lost so much blood. My milk wasn't coming in. I was just weak. Like I felt like I couldn't leave the bed.
I mean, you probably couldn't really.
Yeah.
I mean, you could have if you had
I
to,
was
but
like
when you're
faint.
like weak like that,
Yeah.
yeah, the loss of blood
And
is real.
I just remember my doula coming over like 2 days after and was like, did they not like give you any supplements to take or iron? And I was like, no, they just kind of sent us home. I don't know. So then I started on all these supplements, and breastfeeding was just very hard. My milk just really never came in. And being in that environment for 9 months of being surrounded by midwives and, going that natural route, I was like, not against formula, but they push the breast so much that it wasn't like even considered like, oh, I could just use formula.
Mm-hmm.
When we went to our pediatrician, she was just like, you need formula. Like
Mm-hmm.
this baby is not doing well. And, we just, it was just like they kept, you keep hearing, just put him at the breast and it'll all work out and whatever. And now I'm just like, fed is best. And
Right. Yeah,
if
it's
it
really
works, it
hard.
works.
Sure. And if even when everything goes how you want it to, and there are no other medical issues or whatever, for some people it still doesn't come in.
Mhm.
However, if there's a loss of blood, your body is like, okay, our primary mission here is to make blood
Mhm.
and recover. And for a lot of people, that loss of blood really um, prevents milk from coming in. It
Yeah,
has like a
which
real impact.
yeah, I didn't know at the time. Or else I would have just been like, yeah, formula.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, postpartum was just really tough. I got very obsessed with pumping.
Mm-hmm.
I ended up exclusively pumping. We did supplement with formula, but I was like still very diehard about
Mm-hmm.
I want him to get as much breast milk as I can.
Mm-hmm.
So I would track everything and write everything down. So I was tracking how many ounces I was pumping. I was tracking how many ounces he was eating.
Mm-hmm.
It was just like so much. I had like a little notebook. And when again, like Natalie said, when you're in it, you don't realize that that's not the best thing you should be doing. I wasn't
Right.
bonding. I wasn't enjoying feeding my baby.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Even you can bond just the same with a bottle as you can with breastfeeding.
Right.
And I wasn't doing that because I was so focused on the milk and everything.
Yeah, I think in some ways, like the bonding and stuff is, I wouldn't say it's a luxury. It's a necessity. However, when survival is uh, the first job, like for you, if you've been through something like that, and then a doctor's like, this baby's not doing well, like that really lights up something in you to get hyper focused on making sure everything's okay.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then bonding comes. Yeah,
Yeah,
it's
yeah,
tough.
yeah,
So it
yeah,
makes sense you would be anxious.
yeah. And I didn't realize it. I just thought that that's what being a mom was. It's just being hyper vigilant 24/7.
Mm-hmm.
um, so when I went back to work and Arthur went to daycare, I was just like, oh my gosh, this is real life. You're
Mm-hmm.
like out of it and
Mm-hmm.
being away from him, like I wasn't like missing him, which is sad, and it was like, oh, I can not be anxious when
Oh,
I'm
right.
at work.
Yep.
So
Mm-hmm.
that's when I really realized that I had postpartum anxiety, and I
Mm-hmm.
started going to a therapist, um, which helped a lot. Even just like saying to Jason and my friends and stuff, like I have postpartum anxiety. Like
Mm-hmm.
just that, it's like a weight is lifted.
Totally.
Like there, I'm not gonna feel like this forever.
Mm-hmm.
You know.
Right. Yeah, and it does. I don't know about you, for you, Natalie, maybe too. It does feel like you're going to be in it forever. Like it just doesn't. Maybe theoretically you can know that it'll be different at some point, but the emotional part of it, it's so overwhelming and so heavy. It feels hard to even imagine that this that part of your journey will end and you'll feel back to yourself.
Mhm. Yeah, you're like, this is my new normal.
And it sucks.
And it's not.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that is really, really hard. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah. And with my second, I did have some pregnancy, like depression. I couldn't birth at the birthing center. So it was just like a whole thing. But that, my birth with my daughter was definitely, it was so healing, just so different. My postpartum experience was like a 180. It was, I did formula from the get go. The first day in the hospital, I told the nurse, like, bring me formula. I still pumped, but I wasn't focused on that. Yeah. So
Yeah. It's
yeah,
amazing how much, I mean, in the span of time, the length of your birth, the actual birth experience isn't like that much time. Like, sure, it can go on for days, but the amount of impact that it has on you, and on anybody is a pretty big deal. It's like it's a big event,
yeah,
and it can
Yeah.
sure have a negative impact.
yeah.
Not all the time, but it sure can.
It was like similar to a lot of birth stories we hear now. I didn't realize I had birth trauma until I started really talking about my birth story, digging into it, and realizing that transfer, that moment where I felt out of control in my postpartum, me trying to control everything is like, it's just such a direct, relation to that.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. Yeah, you're nodding, Natalie.
Yeah, I mean, just being with Liz and seeing like the progression of, I remember her notebook. I remember watching her and I'm thinking, is this what it's like? And then I remember getting like a tracker myself and I never wrote anything down because I didn't like know that like if that was like a thing. But I remember seeing that and so yeah, I think like watching like Liz these past few years kind of understanding like what happened and her sharing and being so vulnerable in those moments. Um, I've just like seen her like overcome and like really process her birth because I wasn't there. The news I got was like she lost a lot of blood. And so now knowing like the extent, I'm just like so proud of her and being able to process it. And then now help women because she's, really focusing on like postpartum doula work. And so I'm excited for what she's going to do.
That's awesome. Yeah, how is it for you guys? Having obviously had your own birth experiences, hearing other people talk about their experiences as well. I guess especially if it has any similarities to your own. Is it My real question is like, does it continue to feel healing to you to hear other people's experiences, if they're similar to yours, or even if they're not?
Yeah, I think
Yeah.
for me, knowing that what we're putting out there is going to help other people is healing. As a story, I don't know, a story listener, I guess. we hold space in the moment for whoever we're interviewing at the time, and connect pretty deeply with people in
Yeah.
that moment.
I mean, you used a word that I also want to follow up on. I know that the community and building a community is part of what you guys are doing and wanting to do. And in what ways do you find that community is happening, or in what ways are you shaping a community of support?
Yeah. So recently we just had like a first little like happy hour with some St. Louis natives. So that's been really fun. It was kind of a collection of like people we've had on the birth podcast. And then we also like partnered with like a local St. Louis mom here who was on the podcast. So we just like had women like just all together like at a bar, like because moms need support even like after the birth. Boy, do moms need their village. Like I have a shirt that literally said it takes a village. Um and so that's been amazing. And then we have like a Facebook group called the Golden Hour Birth Circle. So really creating the community there of just like fun questions throughout the day and posting the episodes and I mean it still has its room for growth, but hopefully people can like share their own experiences and like reach out for questions and things like that. We have high hopes for it. And then obviously like with our um processing your birth and things, we like hope to make it a little in person for St. Louis natives. I wish people could just like, come on in from everywhere that we've had that we've had listeners on and guests on. But yeah, it's really been fun. Like we had this woman from Virginia sharing her birth story and like I honestly feels like she's a friend of mine. And Liz, I'm sure you can say the same. Um it just feels like once they're on, it's like we can comment like on each other's Instagram stories and if I'm ever out in Virginia, which like I don't know why I would be, but if I'm ever out that way, I'm gonna tell her and we're gonna get together
Right.
and have a drink.
Yeah, I mean it's a great way to be connected and to bond. Because I mean you're sharing something really for some people very intimate and very personal.
Mhm.
And once you've kind of crossed that barrier and you're sharing those kinds of things with each other, for sure you can feel really connected and be really connected. So you guys are also supporting a lot of people who can access you wherever by starting an online course. Can you say a little bit about that?
Yeah. So, through the podcast and through our own kind of processing of our birth stories, we found that it healed us a lot and empowered us. We're very open about our stories. And so that's in our own way, that's empowering. So, our hope was to help other people process their own birth stories, to be empowered, healing, healed, and just more connected um, to others, and whatever that looks like for them. We're not. There's no end goal that we're saying by taking this course you're gonna, you know, I don't know, be
Healed
super
of birth
well.
trauma.
Yeah, definitely
Yeah.
not. like, everyone's journey is so different, but through the course, we hope to help people reflect on their own story. Like I said, with my own story, I didn't realize that that moment of feeling helpless like really impacted me until I really dug into my own story. And then just kind of reinterpreting that, reinterpreting your story, to kind of reclaim your own narrative, instead of saying, my uh, sorry, there's banging up
It's all good.
upstairs.
I can't hear
um, but yeah, reframing your own narrative, and then just different, we want to bring together different, healing techniques, and moving forward, and it'll have different aspects of, guided meditations, um, journaling, sharing. We hope to have in person and online, kind of birth circles where we can connect with other people and kind of hear each other's stories. And then just sharing a lot of resources. I think that's going to be a big theme of ours.
Yeah. Making sure people have the stuff you wish you would have had.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And really just like taking a moment to like make sense of what happened. Like, for instance, having that out of control feeling that Liz felt in that moment carried on to her postpartum experience. And I think in postpartum, you're making sense of like your birth and like what happened. And you're really like focusing on that part because for me, it was like, oh, a week ago, oh, 2 weeks ago. And you can like really like hold on to like the little things that happened. And so just kind of making sense of the experience as a whole and just birth is like such a crazy moment. You're literally you grew this human and now you're gonna like put it out into the world and um just like having those moments of understanding what happened and being able to like pick out the good parts and remember the good parts and maybe just make sense of the parts that weren't planned and that you didn't plan for and you didn't want, but just being okay with those moments that did happen.
Mm-hmm. And uh, a lot of my thinking was, oh, if I had done this differently, or you get a lot of guilt or self blame when you are thinking about what happened.
Right.
So definitely, addressing that as well, and yeah, just being very vulnerable,
Mm-hmm.
and it just can help so much. Just addressing all of those feelings that come up.
Yeah, for sure.
Mm-hmm.
And there are not a lot of spaces where people can share their experience or all of it or attend to the emotional parts of it, especially in the busyness of having uh, a new baby or going through whatever other complications postpartum.
Mm-hmm.
It's hard to settle in and really think about stuff. So,
Yeah. And the course is going to be pretty simple. It's not like you have to sit here for an hour and listen to me and Natalie talk. It's a lot of self guided, work.
that's great. That's great. Well, thank you so much for the work that you're doing, creating a space for people to tell their birth stories and coming on here to share what you're doing and sharing your story as well. It's awesome. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Please find more about Liz and Natalie on the goldenhourbirthpodcast.com. You can also find them on Instagram, Golden Hour Birth Podcast, and Facebook, the Golden Hour Birth Podcast. And please do also go to wellmindperinatal.com/courses to find out more about the courses that I offer for people who are really trying to understand their emotional postpartum experience and to figure out if you yourself are dealing with a perinatal mood or anxiety disorder. The course goes over some questions you can think about and also tips and tricks and tools on how to cope. And then additionally, most importantly, how to find the resources you need for healing. Thank you so much for being with us. Until next time.